Sarah's heart raced as she unfolded the invitation, her hands trembling. Her ex-fiancé, Jack, and her best friend, Lily, were getting married to each other. With a past laced in secrets and a mysterious date by her side, Sarah's decision to attend would stir a whirlwind no one saw coming. Keep watching to find out how this story unfolds. You won't want to miss it. Before we begin, I'd love to know where in the world you are watching our videos from. Drop your location in the comment. Let's begin. Sarah sat on her bed, staring at the cream-colored envelope in her hands. Her fingers shook as she slowly opened it, wondering who would send her something so fancy. Inside was a delicate, gold-embossed card that glistened in the sunlight streaming through her window. She traced the elegant script with her finger, but her heart dropped as she read the names, Jack and Lily. Jack, her ex-fiancé, the one she thought she'd marry, the one she dreamed about for so long. And Lily, her best friend since childhood, the one she shared all her secrets and dreams with. They were getting married to each other. It was almost too much to bear. For a moment, Sarah felt frozen. It seemed like her whole world had just tipped upside down. She never imagined that Jack and Lily, of all people, would end up together. She had known they'd become friends, but this? How could her best friend and her ex-fiancé do this to her? She glanced back at the invitation, her vision blurring with the beginning of tears. She had managed to convince herself she was over Jack, that he was just a part of her past. But now, seeing his name next to Lily's, everything came rushing back. The long nights they spent planning their future together, the little gifts and love notes they left each other, the way he had once looked at her as if she were the only person in the world. Her hands clenched the invitation tightly, and she felt a mix of anger and sadness. It was like they were trying to rub it in her face, to remind her of the love she had lost. But were they? Were they really doing this to hurt her, or was it just her mind playing tricks on her? Sarah took a deep breath, trying to calm herself down. Maybe they were genuinely trying to include her, to show that they cared about her enough to invite her to their special day. Or maybe they thought inviting her would prove there were no hard feelings. But the doubts wouldn't go away. Is this some kind of trap? Are they inviting me just to flaunt their happiness in front of me? Or are they hoping I'll be too hurt to come, and then they won't have to deal with me? She whispered to herself, biting her lip. The thought of skipping the wedding crossed her mind more than once. What good would it do to go? What can she possibly gain from watching Jack and Lily pledge their lives to each other, the same way she once dreamed Jack would do with her? And yet, deep down, another thought began to take root. What if going could show them, and herself, that she was strong enough to handle this? What if attending the wedding was her way of moving on, of proving that she was no longer heartbroken and could face them happy and whole? Sarah turned to her mother, who had been quietly watching her. Her mom had always been her greatest support, her rock. "Should I go, Mom?" Sarah asked, her voice shaky. Her mother gave her a gentle smile, one filled with both warmth and sadness. "Only you can decide that, sweetheart. But remember, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. If going will hurt you more, then maybe it's best to stay away." Her mother's words made sense, but there was still a flicker of determination in Sarah. She didn't want Jack or Lily to think she was sitting at home, pining for him or feeling like she had been left behind. She wanted to show them, or maybe just herself, that she could still smile, even if her heart ached a little. The next day, Sarah met up with a few of her friends to get their opinions. They'd all gasped when they heard about the invitation. "You have to go, Sarah," her friend Emily said firmly. "Show them they didn't break you. Show them you're stronger than this." Her friend Max, however, disagreed. "Why put yourself through the pain? You don't need to see them together, rubbing it in your face." Sarah's heart felt torn. She wanted to go, but she was also afraid. She feared she'd break down or feel humiliated. But the idea of showing up strong, looking her best, and showing them both that she had moved on, it was tempting. She could see herself in a beautiful dress, smiling and calm, exuding confidence. Maybe she even brings someone with her to prove that she wasn't alone or waiting for Jack. Her heart thudded at the thought. Could she find someone willing to be her date for the night? someone who would understand how hard this was for her. Just imagining it made her feel a little braver, like she could walk into that wedding with her head held high. Her family, however, was split. Her older sister told her to skip it, that she didn't know anyone anything, least of all her ex and former best friend. Her father, always the pragmatic one, simply said, "Go if you think you'll regret not going. But don't go to make them see anything. Go for yourself." As the days passed and the wedding drew closer, Sarah's heart continued its emotional tug-of-war. Every time she thought she'd made a decision, doubts crept back in. But finally, the day before the wedding, she stood in front of her mirror looking at herself, determined. With one final look at the invitation, she made up her mind. She was going, not for Jack or for Lily, but for herself. To close this chapter of her life with courage and strength. As she closed her eyes, she took a deep breath, letting go of some of the pain that had been buried for so long. The next day, she would face her past, and she would do it with grace, even if her heart felt like it might shatter. Unknowingly, she was about to step into one of the most challenging days of her life, filled with secrets she couldn't even imagine. Sarah sat on her couch, scrolling through her contacts for the 100th time. Who could she bring as her date? She considered asking one of her friends, but the thought of arriving with someone who didn't truly fit the role of supportive date just didn't sit right. She wanted someone strong beside her, someone who could make Jack and Lily see that she'd really moved on. But no one felt right. With a sigh, she put her phone down and glanced out the window. She could see her new neighbor, Ryan, watering his plants on the balcony across from hers. He was tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair that seemed always to fall perfectly, and an air of mystery that seemed to follow him like a shadow. She had seen him only a few times, each encounter brief but memorable. He was polite but distant, and whenever she saw him around the building, he usually had a book in hand or sometimes just a thoughtful look on his face, as if he had 1,000 stories he would never tell. Sarah's curiosity flickered as she watched him. She didn't know much about Ryan, only that he had moved in recently and that he kept to himself. Some neighbors whispered that he was hiding something, what no one knew. Despite his quiet demeanor, there was something captivating about him, a charm that made people look twice. Perhaps it was the way he held himself, confident but somehow guarded, as though he carried a secret he didn't trust anyone with. An idea began to form in Sarah's mind. Could she ask him to come with her? Would he even agree? The thought seemed silly at first, but then, as she continued watching him, she felt a strange pull. Ryan was different from anyone she knew. He might just be the perfect date, someone who wouldn't be fazed by the complexities of her past. Plus, if Jack and Lily saw her with someone like him, it would certainly send a message, one that she had moved on and was happier than ever. Before she could second-guess herself, Sarah found herself walking to her balcony and calling out, "Hey, Ryan." He looked up, his intense gaze softening slightly when he saw her. "Hey, Sarah," he replied, a hint of a smile on his face. His voice was smooth and warm, but with an edge she couldn't quite place. This might sound strange, but I was wondering if I could ask you for a favor." She felt her cheeks flush, suddenly self-conscious. He tilted his head, his eyes filled with curiosity. "A favor?" "Yes. Well, I have a wedding to attend tomorrow. I was thinking maybe you could come with me, as my date." She cringed internally, realizing how awkward it sounded. But to her surprise, he didn't look shocked or annoyed. Instead, he studied her for a moment as though weighing her words carefully. "A wedding," he repeated, more to himself than to her, his gaze far away for a moment before focusing back on her. "Whose wedding?" Sarah hesitated, but there was something in Ryan's gaze that made her want to tell him the truth. "It's my ex-fiancé's wedding. He's marrying my best friend." Ryan's eyebrows rose slightly, and a faint smile curved on his lips. But it wasn't a mocking smile. It was one of quiet understanding. "Sounds complicated." She chuckled nervously. "Yeah, you could say that." He paused for a moment, seeming to consider her request. Finally, he nodded. "All right, I'll come with you." A rush of relief and excitement surged through her. "Really? Thank you. I I wasn't sure if you'd say yes, but this means a lot. Ryan simply nodded, his face calm and collected. When do you want me to be ready? Tomorrow morning, she replied, a little breathlessly. I'll pick you up. Perfect. He flashed her a small smile that sent a strange flutter through her stomach, and then he returned to his plants, as if their entire conversation had been perfectly ordinary. Sarah couldn't help but smile as she went back inside. She had her date, and he was mysterious, charming, and just the right amount of unpredictable. The next morning, Sarah felt more nervous than she anticipated. She wore a simple yet elegant dress, one that made her feel confident and beautiful. When she knocked on Ryan's door, he opened it almost instantly, dressed in a suit that fit him perfectly. He looked different. Sophisticated yet somehow still mysterious, his dark eyes carrying an expression that she couldn't quite read. You look amazing, he said, his voice soft but sincere. Sarah's cheeks flushed, and she mumbled a quick thanks, glancing down shyly. The drive to the wedding was filled with quiet conversation. Sarah learned that Ryan had moved to the city for a fresh start, though he didn't elaborate. He seemed to enjoy listening more than talking, asking her questions about her life and how she felt about the wedding. There was something calming about his presence, as if he were a silent pillar of strength. Finally, they arrived at the venue. As they walked in together, Sarah's heart pounded, but she felt grounded with Ryan beside her. The whispers began immediately as guests noticed them. Sarah could see a few people eyeing Ryan, curious and maybe a bit intimidated. It didn't help that he held himself with a quiet confidence, his face expressionless yet somehow inviting attention. He was the kind of person people wanted to know but were too afraid to approach. Sarah's nerves spiked when she spotted Jack and Lily near the entrance, greeting guests. The moment Jack noticed her, his face faltered, his smile slipping just slightly. And when he saw Ryan beside her, his eyes darkened, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. Lily, too, looked taken aback. Her smile tightened, and her gaze flicked to Ryan before settling back on Sarah. Sarah could feel both their eyes on her, scanning her, trying to figure out who this man was and why he was with her. And strangely, that made her feel powerful, like she had the upper hand for once. Ryan leaned over and whispered, "You're doing great. Just breathe." His words soothed her, and she shot him a grateful smile. But the mystery surrounding him only grew stronger. Why was he so calm in such a tense situation? He seemed unfazed by all the curious stares and whispers, like he was used to being the center of attention without letting it touch him. As they moved through the crowd, Sarah began to notice the odd looks some guests were giving Ryan, as if they recognized him but weren't quite sure from where. Even Jack's mother, who usually wore a welcoming smile, looked uncomfortable when her eyes fell on him, quickly turning away without saying a word. Sarah felt a twinge of curiosity mixed with a bit of worry. Who exactly was Ryan? And what was he hiding? But she couldn't let herself get distracted. For now, she needed to focus on the wedding and keep her head held high. As long as Ryan was beside her, she felt stronger, more certain of herself. Little did she know, though, that Ryan's reasons for agreeing to come with her were far more personal than she'd ever imagined, and that he was hiding a secret that would soon change everything. The wedding venue buzzed with anticipation as guests milled around, admiring the intricate flower arrangements and the towering white cake at the center of the reception hall. Yet as Sarah and Ryan walked in, it was as though all eyes turned to them in unison. A ripple of whispered curiosity swept through the crowd, heads turning and hushed voices rising as guests leaned in to speak to one another, their glances flicking between Sarah and her mysterious date. Sarah felt the weight of their stares, but with Ryan by her side, she kept her chin high, determined to stay composed. She could sense that people were curious about who the striking man beside her was and why he seemed so out of place, yet so comfortable. His presence radiated calm confidence, as if he belonged everywhere and nowhere all at once. While Sarah was nervous, she felt a strange thrill too, like walking through the eye of a storm, safe but aware that chaos could break loose at any moment. As they approached the group of people nearest to Jack and Lily, Sarah spotted them welcoming guests with polite smiles, both dressed in perfect wedding elegance. Lily, in her pristine lace gown, looked as if she were floating, her face glowing with happiness, until she caught sight of Sarah and Ryan. Her smile slipped, her eyes widening just slightly as she processed who she was seeing. Jack, too, faltered, his jaw clenched, and he blinked a few times as though trying to make sure he wasn't seeing things. His face turned unreadable, though Sarah caught a flicker of something behind his gaze, perhaps regret, perhaps discomfort. She felt a brief pang of satisfaction at his reaction, which made her stand a little taller. He wasn't expecting this, and that small victory was enough to settle some of her nerves. But then, an unexpected expression crossed Jack's face when he looked at Ryan. It wasn't just surprise or jealousy. There was something darker, as if Jack were recognizing someone from a bad memory. Jack's face twisted in a way Sarah hadn't seen before, a mix of surprise and something closer to fear. Whispers among the guests started to grow louder. They'd seen Sarah arrive with a man who was clearly not a friend or distant acquaintance. Some people recognized her, the ex-fiancé who had been so close to being the bride herself, and began murmuring theories and speculations. Others who noticed Ryan seemed taken aback, almost as if he were familiar. People around them leaned close to ask each other questions, glancing at Ryan with wide eyes and hushed voices. Sarah felt a small nudge and looked to her right. Ryan had leaned close to her, his voice just a whisper, "You're handling this well. Just remember to breathe." His voice was calm and steady, grounding her in a way that made her feel a little less out of place. She looked up at him, thankful he'd come with her, though her curiosity about him grew by the second. Suddenly, she spotted Jack's mother, Marianne, watching them from across the room. Marianne had once adored Sarah, treating her almost like a daughter, welcoming her into the family with open arms and showering her with affection. But now her face was twisted in something Sarah couldn't quite identify. Was it anger? Fear? Shock? Her gaze was glued to Ryan, and the more she stared, the more her expression darkened. Sarah glanced at Ryan, who seemed entirely unfazed by the reactions he was receiving, and a creeping suspicion grew in her mind. Why did Marianne look so distressed to see him? She had never even met him, or had she? As Marianne quickly turned away, muttering something to herself, Sarah caught Jack's father whispering harshly in her ear, his eyes darting between Ryan and Sarah as if something terrible had just happened. As they moved further into the room, Sarah overheard snippets of conversation from nearby guests. "Isn't that Ryan? Could it really be him? I thought he was long gone." The words swirled around her, strange and out of place, like pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit together. What were they talking about? Who did they think Ryan was? Ryan, for his part, showed no sign that he was affected by the whispers or the stares. His face remained calm, almost too calm, as though he were carefully controlling each expression, revealing nothing of what he might be feeling. Sarah wanted to ask him if he knew what was going on, but the moment felt too delicate, too charged with hidden tension. As they made their way to their seats, Sarah noticed that Ryan's eyes roamed the room as if he were surveying it carefully, taking in every detail. His gaze lingered on certain people like Jack's parents, who avoided his glance, and even Jack himself, who continued to watch Ryan with a look that mixed fear with anger. Ryan's presence was stirring something up, bringing hidden feelings to the surface. Marianne avoided them for the rest of the ceremony, a detail that Sarah couldn't ignore. It was clear she wanted nothing to do with Ryan, yet Sarah was certain she'd never met him before. The more she thought about it, the more confusing it became. Had Ryan known Jack's family before this? Was there something he wasn't telling her? The way everyone looked at him, as if he were some sort of ghost from the past, sent a chill down her spine. Then, as the vows were being read, a murmur rose in the back of the hall. It started quietly, then grew, small groups of guests whispering and glancing at Sarah and Ryan. Sarah caught snippets, phrases that seemed absurd, but felt as though they held some hidden truth. Remember the incident with Jack and his old friend, the one who disappeared? Could it be? He's changed, but the resemblance? Sarah's heart pounded. Could it be possible that Ryan was connected to Jack's past, something Jack had kept hidden even from her? She glanced at Ryan, who remained stoic, seemingly unmoved by the suspicions swirling around him. As the ceremony ended and guests began to move into the reception area, Sarah caught Jack's mother staring at her again, this time her expression full of resentment. She mouthed something Sarah couldn't make out, then turned sharply, ushering her husband away from the newlyweds and closer to the exit, as if trying to escape the whole scene. "Do you know her?" Sarah finally whispered to Ryan, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. Ryan looked down at her, his face still unreadable. "I knew Jack's family once," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "A long time ago." There was a finality in his voice that made it clear he wasn't going to say more, but the simple statement confirmed Sarah's suspicions. This wasn't just about Jack marrying her best friend. This was about something buried in the past, a secret she hadn't known until now. And by the looks on the faces around them, it was something big, something no one wanted to confront. As she stood by Ryan's side, Sarah realized she was caught in the middle of a far deeper mystery than she had ever expected. Jack's family wasn't just wary of Ryan, they were afraid of him. The tension around them grew sharper with each passing moment, leaving Sarah feeling both captivated and unsettled. There was no turning back now, and whatever secrets lay hidden, she was about to uncover them, whether she was ready or not. As the reception went on, Sarah could feel a growing tension around her, the kind that buzzed like electricity just before a storm. People continued to whisper, stealing glances at Ryan, their expressions full of questions, unease, and memories they didn't seem to want to revisit. Sarah had tried to brush it off, but the words she overheard, the fragments of conversation swirling around her, made her feel uneasy. Standing beside Ryan, she felt like a part of a mystery that she didn't understand. Who was this man really? Why did Jack and his family react as though Ryan's presence was something to fear? The whole day had already been strange enough, but now it felt like she was walking through someone else's story, one she knew nothing about. A few feet away, a group of older guests whispered in hushed voices. They hadn't noticed Sarah standing nearby, but she caught snippets of their conversation that made her freeze. "Jack's old friend. You remember what happened between them, right?" "Shh, you're not here." "But yes, he's back after all this time." "I thought he'd never return, not after what Jack did." They went quiet as one of the guests glanced around, noticing Sarah. They quickly shuffled away, leaving Sarah standing alone, heart racing. She felt a chill sweep over her. What had Jack done to Ryan? And why did everyone seem to know something she didn't? Unable to contain her curiosity any longer, Sarah looked up at Ryan, who was watching her carefully, as if he could sense the questions spinning in her mind. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Ryan, what's going on? Why does everyone here act like they know you? And why are they afraid?" He held her gaze, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he seemed to consider whether to tell her the truth. Finally, he took a deep breath. "Come with me," he said, his voice low and calm. They walked out to a quiet corner of the garden, away from the guests and the prying eyes. Ryan looked out into the distance, as if he were seeing things she couldn't see. He took a moment, then finally turned to face her, his expression shifting from calm to something darker. Hurt, maybe, or something deeper, buried beneath layers of guarded emotions. "Jack and I," he began slowly, "we were once best friends. Closer than brothers. I grew up with him, practically lived with his family. For a long time, they were my family too. Until," he hesitated, pain flickering in his eyes. Sarah's heart pounded. She couldn't imagine Jack and Ryan as friends, let alone close ones. It felt like a completely different world, a piece of the past that didn't belong to the Jack she'd known. "Until what?" she asked softly, encouraging him to continue. "Until he betrayed me," Ryan said, his voice carrying a weight of bitterness and loss. "We had planned to start a business together, put our dreams into reality. It was something we'd worked on for years. But when the time came, Jack took everything. The money, the clients, the reputation. He threw me under the bus, told everyone I'd messed up, made me look like a fool. Overnight, I lost everything. My reputation, my career, everything I'd worked for. And he went on, took it all for himself. Sarah felt a rush of shock, her heart aching as she listened. She had never imagined Jack could do something like this. The man she'd known had been charming, ambitious, maybe a little selfish, but this sounded like the story of someone else entirely, someone capable of hurting his closest friend for his own gain. But why? She asked, her voice shaking. Why would he do that to you? Ryan let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. Ambition, greed. I don't know. Maybe he was afraid I'd outshine him, or maybe he just wanted it all for himself. He never told me. I only know that he turned his back on me, and when I tried to confront him, he brushed me off, made me feel like I was the one who was wrong. And his family, they went along with him, acted like I'd never even been a part of their lives. Sarah felt sick to her stomach. She remembered how Jack had spoken so highly of his success, how he'd always boasted about his achievements. It hurt to realize that all those things she'd admired in him might have come from someone else's dreams, stolen from someone who had once trusted him. But why are you here, Ryan? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. If he hurt you that badly, why come to his wedding? Ryan looked down, his face softening for a moment. Closure, he said simply. I wanted to see him one last time, to make peace with it, to let go of all the anger I've carried for so long. When you asked me to come, I knew it was a chance to face him, finally, to show him that his actions didn't destroy me, that I moved on, that I'm stronger. Sarah nodded, feeling a mix of admiration and sadness. She understood why he'd agreed to come with her, but she couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal gnawing at her heart. She thought back to all the times Jack had painted himself as the hero, the self-made success story. How much of it had been a lie? She looked up at Ryan, her mind racing. Does Leslie know? Does she know what he did? Ryan shrugged. I don't know. I don't think so. But if she does, then she's just as guilty. Sarah's heart sank. Could her best friend have known? She thought back to all the times she confided in Lily about her love for Jack, their future plans, and now it all felt so empty. A small, angry part of her wanted to confront them both, to expose Jack for the man he really was. She could practically picture the scene, the shocked faces, the hushed gasps, the truth finally coming to light in front of everyone who thought they knew him. But another part of her held back. Did she really want to ruin their wedding day, to create a scene that would haunt her for the rest of her life? She'd come here to prove her strength, to show that she was moving on, not to stir up the past. And yet, she couldn't just ignore the injustice, the pain Ryan had suffered because of Jack's selfishness. What are you going to do? She asked Ryan, her voice wavering. Are you going to say anything? Ryan looked at her, his face unreadable. I came here for closure, Sarah. But I'm not here to ruin their day. That's not who I am. I just want him to know that he didn't break me, that I survived. Sarah felt a surge of respect for him, mixed with a sadness that she couldn't quite shake. Here was a man who had lost everything, yet he had chosen to forgive, to move on without letting the past define him. She knew she could do the same, to let go of Jack and Lily, to leave them with their secrets and their lies. As the music began and guests gathered for the reception, Sarah took a deep breath, letting the tension in her chest loosen. She wouldn't expose Jack today, wouldn't ruin the wedding. But she knew that from this day forward, she would be free of him, free of the past, and ready to start a new chapter. And as she looked at Ryan, she knew she had found someone who understood her pain, someone who had survived his own battles and come out stronger. Together, they had faced the ghosts of the past, and now they could walk away from them, ready to embrace whatever came next. As Sarah and Ryan stood in the garden, the noise of the wedding reception floated through the open doors. She made her decision. She would let this go and walk away with her head held high, just as Ryan had planned. They had both come seeking closure, a final chapter to painful stories, and perhaps that was enough. But deep down, something still tugged at Sarah. She'd been lied to, betrayed by two people she once held dear, and the weight of that truth felt too heavy to simply ignore. Ryan sensed her hesitation and gave her a soft, knowing smile. "Let's leave," he said, his voice steady. "We don't need to stay any longer." Just then, a familiar voice boomed through the speakers, calling everyone back inside. It was time for the toast, the part of the evening where friends and family would stand and share stories, memories, and well wishes for Jack and Lily's future. Sarah had planned to slip out during this time, hoping to avoid the tearful speeches that would only remind her of her own broken dreams. But as she and Ryan started to move toward the door, he paused, his eyes fixed on the microphone stand. "I need to say something," Ryan murmured, his voice low but resolute. Sarah's eyes widened, and she felt a surge of both fear and anticipation. "Are you sure? You don't have to. It might only make things harder." Ryan's face was calm, but there was a fire in his eyes she hadn't seen before. "I know, but sometimes people need to face the truth, especially when they've hurt others." Before she could respond, he turned and walked back into the hall. Sarah followed him, heart pounding. The crowd hushed as Ryan approached the front of the room. All eyes were on him now, some faces curious, others tense, recognizing the man they had all been whispering about. Jack and Lily, standing side by side, shared a look of confusion and growing discomfort as they watched Ryan approach the microphone. Jack's face paled as realization dawned on him, and he took a step forward, as if he wanted to stop what was about to happen. Ryan cleared his throat, his voice carrying a calm strength that silenced any murmurs left in the room. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his tone respectful but firm. "I didn't come here expecting to speak, but as I stand here today, I realize there's something important I need to share, something that everyone deserves to know." The guests held their breath, some exchanging nervous glances, while others looked intently at Ryan, waiting for the story he was about to reveal. "I'm sure some of you remember me, though it's been many years. Jack and I were once very close, more than close. We grew up together, built dreams together, and trusted each other with everything we had." His gaze shifted to Jack, whose face was tight with anger and fear. Ryan paused, letting his words sink in. But all that trust was broken when Jack chose his own gain over our friendship. Years ago, we started building something together, something that meant the world to both of us. We had plans, contracts, clients who believed in us, until the day Jack took it all for himself, leaving me in a mess he created, a mess he made sure would only ruin me. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Gasps escaped a few guests, and whispers erupted. Ryan's words seemed to weigh down the entire room, his voice cutting through the facade Jack had built. Lily's face grew pale as she glanced at Jack, confusion and worry flickering in her eyes. Ryan's voice softened, but it didn't lose its edge. He didn't just betray a friend, he betrayed the trust of everyone who believed in him. "He left me with nothing. No career, no home, no future. I lost everything because of the man I once called my brother." Jack's face contorted with rage, his hands clenched tightly at his sides. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "He's lying. He's here to ruin things." Ryan's gaze remained steady. "I came here not to ruin things, but to find closure. To remind you, Jack, that no amount of lies or success can erase the truth." By now, the room was tense with shock, some guests murmuring in hushed tones, while others stared in stunned silence. Jack's parents looked horrified, their faces turning from shock to shame as they processed Ryan's words. Sarah watched Lily's expression change from confusion to dawning horror as she began to understand what kind of person Jack truly was. For a moment, silence fell over the room, everyone frozen in the weight of Ryan's confession. Then a few murmurs grew louder, turning into full conversations as guests began to piece together fragments of the past and question the man they thought they knew. Lily finally turned to Jack, her voice shaking. "Jack, is this true?" Jack's face twisted with panic. He stumbled over his words, desperately trying to regain control of the situation. "Lily, don't listen to him. He's just trying to ruin our day. He's jealous. He's always been jealous." But the crowd was no longer buying his excuses. More guests began murmuring angrily, some shaking their heads in disappointment. Jack's carefully crafted image was unraveling before his eyes, and there was nothing he could say to stop it. Sarah, standing on the edge of the scene, felt a mixture of emotions: satisfaction, relief, and a strange sadness. She looked at Ryan, who stood tall and calm, as though a weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders. His truth had been told, and no one could take that away from him. As guests continued to talk amongst themselves, some voicing their support for Ryan, others turning their backs on Jack, Sarah took a deep breath. She had come here hoping for closure, and though it had arrived in a way she never expected, it was clear that the past had finally released its hold on her. Jack and Lily, the people she once trusted with her heart, now stood exposed, their actions laid bare. Without another word, Sarah walked over to Ryan, who met her with a soft, understanding smile. Together, they turned and walked toward the door, leaving the tangled mess of betrayal and broken trust behind them. As they stepped outside, the evening air felt cool and fresh, as if it, too, had been cleared of all the lies and hurt that had clung to them. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt free. She looked over at Ryan, and he gave her a nod of quiet acknowledgement, as though they both understood the weight they had shed. Sarah felt a renewed strength blossom within her as she walked away from the past, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. And with Ryan beside her, she knew she had found someone who understood her pain, someone who had also faced betrayal and emerged stronger. Together, they were free from the lies of the past, ready to step into a future built on trust and truth. For Jack and Lily, the celebration was over before it had even begun. They were left standing alone, surrounded by whispers of doubt and judgment. Their wedding day had been transformed into something entirely different. A day of reckoning, where the truth finally came to light, and all illusions were stripped away. And for Sarah and Ryan, it was a new beginning, one that neither of them had anticipated, but one that they welcomed side by side. Did you enjoy this story? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section, and also like and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Thanks for watching.